Hello my fiery friends, the Infernoman here with the hottest in budget deck technology. And for today's final deck tech of 2024, we're going to be having a lot of fun with this very spicy build built upon my most favorite of all mechanics.
You! Keep talking.
That's right. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it and show you what we're playing today. Because this deck is built on pure Kenrith.
Ken's Mojo Dojo Casa House.
But before we continue, if you do like any of the content that I do, please like, follow, and subscribe wherever you watch the content. You can support me monthly for a small amount on Patreon, where I have all of my extended bonus footage posted. We also have a Redbubble spot where you can buy merch like stickers and shirts, or for free, all you can just do also is just join our growing community on Discord. Your support helps keep this channel going. All links are in the details below. Longtime viewers of the channel know how we do it. We have to talk about the stats of the deck before we dive right in. So our Kenrith deck today is going to be a 5-color build. We're going to be rocking, of course, 34 creatures in the deck. We have 11 instants, 10 sorceries, 15 artifacts, 6 enchantments, and 26 lands. The land count does look a little low, but I'll explain how that looks in just a few moments. As the name suggests, we're going to try to build up as many energy counters as possible on this 5-color deck to see how much value we can truly get out of the mechanic. We can go big, we can go wide, we can cast stuff for free, we can even burn out our opponent with select cards. Either way, whatever we want to use it for, we just want to try to get to our victory. But you may be asking yourself right now, how is it possible to pull off such a spicy deck on a budget with a pile of energy cards in Arena?
Good question.
Well, I'm glad you asked. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it by talking first about our commander, and that's going to be utilizing Kenrith the Return King. Kenrith here is a 5-mana, 5/5 human noble, and it has 5 different abilities. With 1 red mana, all creatures gain trample and haste until end of turn. 1 in a green puts a +1/+1 counter on target creature. 2 in a white allows you to get 5 life. 3 in a blue allows you to draw a card, and then 4 in a black allows you to put a target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under its owner's control. Woo! So even though the fact that Kenrith here does not really have anything to do with energy, it is an amazing card either way because it will be able to have a ton of utility no matter what we throw at our opponent, and again, we can readjust our game plan accordingly as the game progresses. Also, I think it goes without saying, because this is another Brawl deck, this is going to be quite a lengthy explanation. So hang in there, everybody, and I'm going to try to do this as best as I can, as fast as I can. And with that, let's go ahead, let's begin with our creatures. At the start here, we're going to have Guide of Souls here. Every time a creature enters, we gain 1 life and gain 1 energy. We can also pump up later on when we attack and put some counters on another creature to give it both flying, and it also becomes an angel in addition to its other types. Greenbelt Ravager here mostly likely won't be coming out immediately to start swinging, even though it's a 1-mana 3/4. However, when it does enter, we gain some energy. We can kind of use this as kind of a pseudo combo piece, then just generate a bunch of extra energy as the game goes on. Eddy Trail Hawk here is going to be a 2-mana bird here, where flying, when it enters, you gain 2 energy, and when we attack, you can pay 1 energy to give another attacking creature flying until end of turn. Hex Goldsmith here is going to be another 2-drop where it enters, you gain 2 energy. Also, we can then utilize it to pay to give it first strike. If it deals combat damage to a player, we get to put +1/+1 counter on, so it will grow on its own. Royal Cartographer is great here because it has the landfall ability, so whenever a land we control enters, you also will gain an energy. Pay 6 energy to draw some cards. Tempest Harvester here also will enter when gain us some energy. We can also pay 1 energy to then just loot by drawing a card and discarding a card. Either Poisoner here will enter and we will get 2 energy off of that. It has Death Touch, which is great for blocking reasons. When it does attack, we can then pay 2 to then make a servo token. Glintless Sleeve Siphoner here is going to be another 2-drop where it enters, and then when it enters or attacks, we will gain 1 energy at the beginning of our upkeep. We can also pay 2 energy to help us just draw some cards at the cost of losing some life. Amped Raptor here, I don't think I need to tell you about this card. This card is super sweet, but when it enters, you'll get 2 energy, and then we can start exiling cards from the top of our library until we exile a non-land card, and then we can cast that card by just paying energy as opposed to paying its mana cost, so it's actually great for us to start getting some more stuff out. Smelted Charge Bug here is a 2-mana 1/3. It's an insect, it has menace. When it enters, you'll also gain 2 energy. When it does attack, you can pay for 1 energy, and if you do, another target attacking creature will gain +1/+0 and gain menace until end of turn. Long Tusk Cub is a long time standing creature here that's in the energy mechanic. When it deals combat damage, you'll gain 2 energy. You can also pay 2 energy to put a +1/+1 counter on the Long Tusk Cub at instant speed. Server of the Conduit is one of our mana dorks here. When it enters, you gain 2 energy. You can then pay 1 energy to then just fix our mana however we need. Riddlegate Gargoyle here is a 2-mana 2/2. It has flying. When it enters, you'll gain 3 energy. And when we attack, you can pay 2 energy. And if you do, another target creature you control will gain lifelink until end of turn. Winding Constrictor actually has nothing to do with the mechanic, but it's great for us because it'll allow us to then add up additional counters once we then keep generating more and more energy with our deck. Voltaic Brawler here enters with then 2 energy. When it does attack, you can then pay 1 energy to give it another +1/+1 pump and trample until end of turn. Conduit Goblin here in the 2 drop slot also is a Goblin Warrior. When it enters, you'll gain 2 energy, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, you can also pay 1 energy. If you do, another target creature you control will gain haste and +1/+0 until end of turn. Continuing on, we'll have Inspired Inventor here. It's a 3 mana. When it enters, you can actually pick whatever you like here. You can either gain energy, you put a +1/+1 counter on a creature, or gain a servo token. Solstice Zealot here is going to be a 3 mana 2/3 Rhino Cleric. When it enters, you gain 2 energy. You can also pay 1 energy and tap it to tap a target creature down. Boggart Trawler here actually again has another one of our creatures here that has nothing to do with energy, but we have it in the deck because basically it's a free roll because it actually can be a land in a pinch, or we can utilize it to enter and then exile an opponent's graveyard. Ether Torch Renegade here is a 3 mana here. When it enters, you'll gain 4 energy. You can pay 2 to then ping an opponent's creature, or you can pay 8 energy to then deal 6 damage to a player or planeswalker. Emissarius Soulfire here is a 3-drop here. It's a 1/4. It's a Din Monk. When it enters, when you get 3 energy, you can also pay 2 energy to give an Exalted counter on a creature we control. However, this can only be done at sorcery speed. Cyclops Superconductor here is also going to be a 3 mana for 2/2. It has Prowess. When it enters, you'll gain 3 energy. Whenever it dies, you can then pay additional 3 energy. If you do, the Cyclops will deal damage equal to its power to any target, so this can be great for us to finish off our opponent, depending on how our board state may look. Whirler Virtuoso is another card here that I actually always love here. It's a standby, of course, 4 energy, and it's great. When it enters, you'll gain 3 energy. You can also pay 3 energy to then make a Thopter token. Imperial Voyager, here's the 3 mana. It's a flying, trampling Velkenden Scout. Whenever the Scout will deal combat damage to a player, you'll get that much energy back. Rogue Refiner, here's another simple card where it enters, you then draw a card, and you'll gain 2 energy. Electrostatic Pummeler, okay, we haven't talked about this card in a while, but when it enters, you gain 3 energy. Electrostatic Pummeler will then can pay 3 energy to again pump it up by +X+X, where X is its power. So in other words, if you manage to save up a ton of energy, you can then pump this card up a ton to make it extremely strong and just smash your way to victory. This is one of our go big finishing strategies. Witch Enchanter here in the 4-drop slot is a Human Warlock. Again, it does not have an energy mechanic, but it is a modal land in a pinch, so you can either play it as a land, or if it does enter as a creature, you just destroy an artifact or enchantment an opponent controls. Aetherstorm Rock here is a 4 mana bird. Where it enters, or another creature enters, you'll also gain 1 energy. Whenever it attacks, you can pay 2 energy, and if you do, you put a +1/+1 counter on it and tap up to 1 target creature defending player controls. Scrapper Champion here in the 4-drop is also a Human Artificer. When it enters, you can gain 2 energy. When you do attack with it, you can pay 2 energy. If you do, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. It also has Double Strike, so it's also a great target for us as an attacker. Pima's Aether Seer is a 4 mana 3/2 Elf Druid here. When it enters, you will gain energy equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. So you can gain a ton of energy here if your board state does have a big creature. And then finally, you can pay 3 energy to then make target creature block this turn if able. Bristling Hydra is another great card here that can go big for us. When it enters, you can pay 3 energy. If you pay 3 energy, you put a +1/+1 counter on it, and also protect itself by getting hexproof until end of turn. We have also a brand new card from Modern Horizons 3, so we haven't talked about this card, so let's go over it real quick. Satya Aetherflux Genius here is a 4 mana 3/5 Human Artificer. It also has Menace and Haste. When Satya attacks, you create a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of up to 1 target non-token creature you control. You'll also gain 2 energy, and at the beginning of your next end step, you will have to sacrifice that token unless you pay an amount of energy equal to the mana value of the creature you then copied, which is a great card for us to make a ton of extra copies of anything we want, then either go big, go wide, just whatever we need to do. It's a great card, flexible for the deck. Voltstorm Angel in the 5-drop slot is an angel. It's a 4/4, has flying. When it enters, you'll gain 3 energy. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, you may pay 2 energy. If you do, you choose 1. You can either give the angel Vigilance lifelink until end of turn, or other creatures you control get a +1/+1 until end of turn. Another great finisher for us to either then stabilize or just pump up the whole team. And then finally, our last creature is going to be Pinnacled Monk in the 5-drop slot. It's a Jin Monk here. It's 2/2. It has prowess. When it does enter, you can then bring back an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand, and also it can be a land in a pinch. For your non-creature spells, starting with the instance, we'll have Tune the Narrative here. You draw a card, you gain some energy. Galvanic Discharge is going to be great for us for spot removal. You can then gain some energy and then pay the amount you need to then deal damage to a creature or planeswalker. Razorgrass Ambush here can also be another spot removal card to attacking or blocking creature, dealing 3 damage, or if you need to, it can be a land in a pinch. Ether Spikes are a counter spell here, but also it is scaling up because as long as we have enough energy, we can basically counter what we need to. Bayin Veil here will then soften up all of our opponent's creatures, giving them -2/-0 until end of turn, or it could be a tap land. Harness Lightning is similar to Galvanic Discharge, just a little bit more expensive. Sink into Stupor here can also be a tempo play here, or you can utilize it as a land. Valakut Awakening can again be a tap land, or then you can utilize it to then refuel your hand and then reshuffle to then get a brand new hand. Rush of Inspiration here can either be a tap land, or they can utilize it to then draw some cards and then discard some cards unless you do pay the energy cost. Glimmer of Genius is going to be allowing us to then draw some extra cards here, scrying, and also gain some more energy. And then finally, for additional spot removal, we have Fell the Profane here, which can take out a creature or planeswalker, or you can utilize it as a land. As far as we go into the sorceries, now we have Jolted Awake here to bring something back from the graveyard to our battlefield. You can then utilize it also for cycling if you don't need it to bring something back. Attune with Ether is one of our few cards here to help us ramp to then dig out a basic land for us and then put some energy into our deck. We have Die Young here again as more spot removal for us. It'll -1/-1 something. Sometimes you might need the -1 to then just get around indestructible creatures. Sylvan's Scrying can also help us dig out another land card. Specifically, it can be any land card to put into our hand and then shuffle our library. Sundering Eruption can be spot removal for a land card, but again, we can utilize it as a land itself. Wheel of Potential, similar to our also Valakut Awakening here, we can pay a bunch of energy if we need to, then just exile a bunch of cards and then just refuel our hand. Bottle of Get Recovery is either a tap land, or we can bring something from the graveyard back to our hand. Bridgework Battle here can also be pseudo spot removal, because you can utilize this to then take out a creature by pumping up one of your creatures and fighting it, or then you can utilize it again as a land. Suppression Ray again is also one of our many modal lands here, where it's either a tap land, or then you could tap down a bunch of stuff and then lock it down as long as we pay the energy costs. And then finally, our one and only Wrath of the Skies here, which can also be scaled up depending on however much of energy and also however amount of mana we do want to pay to then just take out what we need to on the board. For artifact and enchantment support, where we're going to be rocking in the 1-drop slot, we have Static Prison here. When it enters, you can exile a non-land permanent an opponent controls until the Static Prison leaves the battlefield. You will get 2 energy, however, you also have to still pay the upkeep cost if you want to keep it on the battlefield. Chthonian Nightmare here is going to be great for us because it is a little complicated to utilize, but when it enters, you'll get 3 energy. However, you pay X amount of energy and sacrifice a creature, bouncing back, of course, the enchantment, and then bringing back a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Just make sure, of course, you pay the appropriate cost for it. When Dowsing Device enters or another artifact we control enters, up to 1 target creature we'll control gets +1/+0 and gain haste until end of turn. So this is great for aggro play. And of course, once you do have enough artifacts on the battlefield, you then flip it into a land, which can also be utilized to help pump up your creatures in the mid to late game. Unstable Amulet is also one of our pseudo card draw spells. When it enters, you get to gain 2 energy. You can also then pay 2 energy to exile the top card of your library, and then you can play that card at least until you exile another card using Unstable Amulet. Exegenitorium here is also another great card for us. However, the conditions in order for us to draw a card with it means you have to pay at least 4 mana at any given time to utilize the card. Arcane Signet, of course, is a staple mana rock for us, so we need it, especially in a 5-color deck. Solar Transformer is also our unique mana rock. Because we are utilizing energy, we can take advantage of the fact that it brings its own ability to then fix our mana. Swiftfoot Boots here is just to support Kenrith here or any other creature we want to have with protection for it. Phyrexian Ironworks is a 3-mana artifact here. When it allows us to then generate some more energy as long as we are attacking. You can pay, of course, 3 energy to make a colorless Phyrexian Golem. Spelunking is an amazing card, especially in a 5-color deck, because when it enters, not only do we get to draw a card, but we can put a land card from our hand onto the battlefield. And of course, lands we control will enter untapped, which is really good and important for our deck. Ether Sphere Harvester is another 3-mana artifact here. It's a vehicle. It has flying. When it enters, you'll gain 2 energy, and then you can pay an extra energy when you do have it as a creature here to give it lifelink until end of turn. You only have to accrue it, thankfully, for just 1. Dynavolt Tower here is a 3-mana artifact. Whenever we cast an instant or sorcery, we'll gain some extra energy. However, we can also pay 5 energy to deal 3 damage to any target we choose. Fabrication Module will allow us to then pump up our creatures. As long as we are gaining energy, you get a +1/+1 counter on target creature we control, or you can pay, of course, and tap this down to give ourselves just energy if we need to. Bespoke Battle Wagon is another one of our artifact vehicles here. With its ability, you can either tap it down to either generate energy, you can pay energy to either tap down a creature, draw a card, or make it an artifact creature if we need to. If you just want to, you can also crew 4 to make it a 5/6 creature. So Ether Revolt here is a 4-mana enchantment, and it has the Revolt ability, where it says, as long as a permanent you control left the battlefield this turn, if a source you control will deal non-combat damage to an opponent or a permanent an opponent controls, it'll deal that much damage +2 instead. And also, whenever you get 1 or more energy, Ether Revolt will deal that much damage to any target. Simply put, while the Revolt ability may be a little bit hard to trigger off depending on how our board state is, you mostly want to care about its secondary ability. As long as we are generating energy, we can then utilize this as a pseudo burn spell to then take out our opponent's creatures or go to face. Primal Barriers is going to be great for us as a 4-mana enchantment. When it enters, you'll gain 2 energy. However, you can also cast creature spells with a mana value of 3 or less by paying the energy cost rather than paying the mana cost. And on top of that, the sweetest part is you can cast those spells as though they have flash, which is great for us to just build out our board as long as we're generating a ton of energy. Once we do have a board that goes wide, you can also then cast Scurry of Gremlins here. This is an enchantment that's 4 mana, and when it enters, you will create 2 1/1 red gremlin creature tokens. Then you get an amount of energy equal to the number of creatures we control. So we have a big board state here. You can gain a ton of energy very quickly. And then to finish off our opponent, you can pay 4 energy to give creatures we control 1+1/+0 and haste until end of turn. And then the final legendary artifact we have here is Aetherworks Marvel. This is an incredibly powerful card, of course. As long as, of course, we have permanents going into the graveyard, we will generate energy. You can then pay 6 energy to look at the top 6 cards of your library and then cast spells from among them without paying any of their mana cost, which is great for us to just keep building out our board state. As far as your mana base is concerned, we're going to keep it as simple as we can within budget means, but of course we will have a couple of key cards to help us fix everything. So we will have 3 plains, 3 islands, 2 swamps, 3 mountains, 3 forests. The World Tree is going to be a key card for us because this will allow us to then fix our mana however we like once we have 6 or more lands on the battlefield. Either hub here because we do generate a ton of energy, so it's perfect for our deck. Arid Archway is a bounce land. We can bounce away maybe one of our modal lands to then recast it as a spell, and it also taps for 2. Command Towers is stable, of course, for any commander deck. Demolition Field can then take out a non-basic land an opponent controls, and then allows us to hopefully dig out another key basic that we will need to fix our cards. Escape Tunnel, Evolving Wilds, Promising Vein, and Terramorphic Expanse all do the same thing. They're all cheap fetch lands to help us dig out our basics. Public Thoroughfare will enter tapped, but we will need to make sure we can tap down another land, or at least an artifact, so that way we can then have this fix our mana however we want to. Urza's Cave is mostly just going to be here to then ideally pull out that copy of the World Tree if we are unable to do it by drawing it. And then finally, Volatile Fault here technically also can work the same way as the Demolition Field, but it's just extra redundancy. It'll help us, of course, do some pseudo fixing as we need to, just with that making that treasure token. Now, before we go over the final part of this, which is going to be the strategies, tips, and tricks that I usually give you with any deck tech, I do want to emphasize this deck is literally built upon the very purpose of this channel, which is budget, jank, and fun. And this deck is definitely going to be very janky because of how its mana base is constructed. But it is a budget deck, so this is what we're working with based on those parameters. However, emphasizing the fun aspect, when it does go off, it is hilariously powerful and actually quite surprisingly good if everything kind of falls into line. So, to emphasize the good parts about this deck is, it is very versatile and very diverse because it is 5 colors. Also, it is highly synergistic because of all the energy you're generating. So the tip I would give you in the early game is generate as much energy as you can while you can. Once you start casting more creatures that will need to then pay that energy cost to then utilize their abilities, to draw cards, to then give them more pump, or maybe to then put abilities on them like lifelink, flying, first strike, menace, whatever, to then just do some more damage, put pressure on your opponent, you'll be very happy once you get that energy cost going. Thankfully, even as you're spending that energy, you have plenty of cards that'll keep regenerating that, so don't be afraid to spend it when you need to. Your other biggest advantage with the deck is we threw in pretty much every relevant Moto card we could, so this way you'll have not only enough lands to cast, but also you'll have enough extra spells, even if they don't generate energy for you in any way, shape, or form. So that's where the versatility of this deck comes into play. Also, it may look clunky in the early game, but as you're generating that energy, there's plenty of different ways, of course, you can just refuel your hand. You have cards such as Dowsing Device, Genitorium, Unstable Amulet. Some of them flip into lands. Some of them will help you draw cards. Some of them will allow you to even cast things for free, like Amped Raptor or Aetherworks Marvel. And of course, you have additional cards that will also keep generating more tokens, which will help you create more copies of extra creatures that you may need on the battlefield with cards like Satya, Aetherflux Genius. The other biggest advantage, of course, with the deck is, while Kenrith is an incredibly powerful utilitarian style commander, he's not necessary to put on the battlefield to get your value out. Think of him more as like a backup option if you do need to catch up, because remember, Kenrith can put those creature cards back onto the battlefield with his ability. You can keep drawing cards with him, stabilize with that life gain, pump your creatures, or just get super aggro when you need to. But this is again where the biggest weakness to this deck comes into play. Because it is a 5-color deck, the biggest weakness is, especially on a budget, it's gonna hurt for several games. I'm not gonna lie, it took me quite a while to get the gameplay footage you see on the bottom because we had a lot of non-games where even when I tried to mulligan to get the right amount of lands, we ended up drawing sometimes dead, or we had a very clunky hand where once we got to certain cards that we wanted to cast to start snowballing everything, we just couldn't get the mana out there. So I want to make sure I do emphasize one more time the expectation of this deck is, it is budget and you're definitely going to feel it. Having said all that, If you still like the deck and you want to take it to the next level, keep the main part of the deck as is, and realistically, all you just need to do at bare minimum is get rid of all of your cheap fetch lands and add in real fetch lands. If you can put those into the deck, whether you're playing here on Brawl or if you actually do want to take it into paper, that'll definitely up your game a lot and you'll have a lot more consistency with casting what you need. Once you get the fetch lands down, then I would upgrade some of your other cheaper lands, maybe take out a couple of basics to put in either some shock lands, surveil lands, or even a couple of triumphs if you can afford to do so. That again will be a little bit again slow on the early part of the game, but once you can then generate a couple of those, you'll have no problem casting the remainder of your cards. The other final key card that's going to really make a big difference for the deck is going to be Spelunking. Spelunking, of course, will make sure, as I mentioned earlier, all of your lands will come into play untapped. This will also include your fetch lands. So as you're fetching things out, this will again speed up the whole game plan. So remember that those key cards are going to be what's going to help you ensure that you can cast things out. But even if you don't get them out, you'll still find many different ways of generating what you need to. And once you manage to go off, you'll be very surprised at how it can pull off this strategy, even though it does look like a giant pile of energy good stuff. Phew, now that we finally got through all of that, if you're still not bored of energy like I am, as always, I will show you on screen right now. There are variants of energy decks we've done throughout the course of this channel, and of course, those links have been linked throughout the course of this video. I will show you, of course, on screen right now, those screen caps of those deck techs we've done, so if you're interested, click on some of those, and I'm sure you'll have some fun if you are interested in continuing to play with this mechanic. But with that all out of the way, here are my final thoughts that I want to give on the deck. Honestly, I absolutely love the mechanic that is energy, but we have to be honest, the energy mechanic does tend to be very polarizing among fans, where it sometimes can be seen as borderline broken and sometimes just pure jank that's almost unplayable. However, I hope today's deck tech will be able to show you that you can still have a lot of fun with it regardless of whichever way you want to build it, whether you do want to go super competitive or in at least our case today, something that was both budget, jank, and of course fun as well. To put it another way, if you're a fan of this energy mechanic, if you're a fan of 5-color decks, and if you're a fan of strategies that encompass a ton of different ways of getting to your victory, then I would definitely say give this deck a try. And I assure you, when you manage to then build up a ton of energy and just overwhelm your opponent with the value that they provide, you're gonna have a lot of fun doing so. You'll be very surprised at how you can pull it off, and I assure you, whether you play this for the new year or even next year or any other time, you will definitely not be disappointed. That's all I have for you today. Thanks again for watching, everyone, and just remember that no matter what you do play in the game of life, always be sure to burn bright. Later.